Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, and we are excited that you are here today with us. We have a special treat for you, and his name is Steve Farber. Now, before I bring Steve on, I actually decided to switch things up today for two reasons. Number one, you always got to get outside your comfort zone as an entrepreneur. And number two, Steve actually has a great intro that I took from his website. So I'm going to click this and we're going to listen to a little bit of Steve because it is amazing.
I want to talk to you about a really important concept in business, but get ready because it's radical. And that concept is love. So just to be clear, I'm a business guy, and trust me, I don't use the word love lightly. I'm the author of the new book, Love is Just Damn Good Business, as well as The Radical Leap, The Radical Edge, and Greater Than Yourself. And I've been in the business of leadership development for 30 years. And I've had the opportunity to work with Microsoft, to Hyatt, to Ernst & Young. I mean, every kind of business you can imagine. Over the last 10 years alone, the business world has spent close to $1 trillion on leadership development. 73% of people are disengaged in their work. 10 years ago, 70%. Something is dreadfully wrong. So I think we need to do something more radical.
So, Steve, oh my goodness, welcome to the show. I just love that. I mean, it's just such a great piece to bring attention to what we're going to talk about today. So before you tell us who the real Steve is, I'm just going to read a little bit of your background as very impressive. So first, Steve Farber is the president of the Extreme Leadership Incorporated and the founder of Extreme Leadership Institute. He's written 4 books, which we're going to talk about today, one of which is his most recent book called Love is Just Damn Good Business, and I love the title. He's also won a Fast Company magazine's Choice Award. He is a top 50 recognized leadership and management expert. He's also worked for the Tom Peters Company, and in 2000, he was the CEO. He is a member of the Transformational Leadership Council and has served as vice chairman of the board of directors of the world-renowned Up With People, a global leadership program for students from 18 to 29, which I just think is amazing, the impact that you could have in that organization on the young ones. So, Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here with you. I was watching that video and it stopped all of a sudden. I was intrigued. I was waiting to see what happens next.
I was going to ask you, it's kind of probably a little weird on the other side of it watching the video. Well, you're going to tell us a lot of what is in the rest of that video. I know you're going to talk about that today. So who's the real Steve? I mean, you heard the intro and we heard a little bit. I mean, tell us about Steve a little bit.
I have no idea. I got to say, Pat, that one of the greatest compliments that I can get, and that I believe anybody can get, is when I hear comments like, "Hey, that you're that guy that I saw on stage. You're that guy whose book I read, and now that I'm sitting here talking with you, you're the same guy. You are that guy." So with me, kind of what you see is what you get. But I'm in the leadership development arena, I guess is the generic way of saying it. In some form or another, I've been doing that for 30 years. It's my life's work. It's my passion. My wife, Veronica, by some startling coincidence, also happens to be my business partner. So, I mean, literally, there is no line between personal life and work life. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this, some of my closest friends started out as clients. And it's what I do. I'm a father of 6, and family's always been very important to me. And I'm a musician, so I have that creative impulse. It's important for me to be able to invent not just ideas, but actually, I don't know that I've ever invented an idea, but to create things is really something that lights me up. So, I write music and I write books and I what's the technical term? I make shit up. That's what I do. And
well, it's good stuff. There's no doubt about it.
But
So
I believe what I do is it's all about people. I believe that we have an obligation to make our lives on this planet as rewarding and fulfilling as possible, not in a self-serving sort of a way, but to be able to do that and have an impact on the world around us at the same time. And I focus on business because I figure, if we could change what it means to be in business, we change everything, because we all go to work somewhere, whether it's for our own company or for somebody else. So if we could change the nature and the experience, the expectation and the experience of what it means to be in business, what it means to go to work, we literally change everything. So it's my passion.
So we talked before we were getting started, and you actually started out in music, and so talk a little bit about that, because it was kind of fun to hear about that.
Yeah, I started to do two things simultaneously in my early 20s. One was to be a musician, and the other was to start a family. You see where that's going. I quickly discovered that, for me anyway, back then at that age, playing music for a living and what do you call it? Feeding people were mutually exclusive ideas. So I gave up the music, and I gave it up for many years, which was really quite a painful thing to do. But eventually I came back to it, not as a way to make a living, but as a way to enhance my life.
So you are an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, you're an author, speaker, coach, consultant, you're a creator, right? You have programs that you've created. So before we jump into the love conversation in business, because I love the love conversation, because I think it's so lacking in our businesses. Talk about your entrepreneur journey. Talk about the challenges. The podcast is titled The Success Ascent, which is a rising journey, and sometimes it goes backwards, but it's always on an upwards trajectory. So talk about what you've experienced, what you've learned in that success journey.
Yeah. So I am an entrepreneur to my core. I'm one of those entrepreneurs who spends a good deal. I spend a good deal of my life as an entrepreneur working with clients who are not entrepreneurs. I mean, I do work with quite a few entrepreneurs as well, but people, in corporate environments and so forth. But it is, I've been an entrepreneur almost my entire adult life, with the exception of 6.5 years in the 90s, when I was the vice president of the Tom Peters Company. And, Tom is one of the most influential management thinkers of our day. And it was an incredible experience, one of the highlights of my professional life. But it sparked me to go off on my own again. So I'm not going to say that it's been a straight ascent from day one. I know that's shocking to other entrepreneurs. It has not been straight up. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
Yeah. The peaks and the troughs are all certainly part of the experience. And that's why, not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur. And when I say it, I don't mean that doesn't have the right connotation, because when I say not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur, that implies that people who are in some way superior.
Right.
And I don't believe that's true. And in fact, it's just a different approach. And it requires a different makeup. It requires a higher risk tolerance,
right,
and a good dose of delusion, right,
sure.
to get us through the day. But one of the things that pushes my buttons a little bit, Pat, and I hear this when I attend entrepreneur conferences and speak at them and just hang out at some of these places and talk to people. I hear comments like, well, in order to live a fulfilling life, you have to be an entrepreneur. If you're working for somebody else, then almost by definition, you're some kind of a victim, or your life is not yours. And that always really bothered me.
Yeah.
Because here's what that means. If I'm saying that as an entrepreneur, as a true entrepreneur, and I want to build a company, what am I going to have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to have employees. So am I saying that my employees are going to somehow be less than because they choose to be my employees
Right.
versus starting companies of their own? It's absurd.
Yeah.
So they're just, what's better, apples or oranges? Well, it depends on if you have the genetic makeup of an apple or an orange, you're
Right.
gonna, so I think, some of entrepreneurialism is built into us. Maybe it's genetic, I don't know. And some of it is acquired. But in any case, if we choose to be an entrepreneur, we have to understand that it's never straight up. It's always,
Right.
there's always switchbacks up that mountain.
Well, I think you're right in that the opportunity is there for many, and where you might see some commonality in the entrepreneur world is behaviorally where people may be willing to take more risks, where behaviorally somebody that may not be something that they're comfortable with, and so they kind of shy away from it, or maybe they have that belief that they can't succeed because of that, because they're not a big risk taker. So give me one success thing you could look back on your journey and go, wow, I wish I would have learned that earlier in my success journey.
Well, my first book, which was called The Radical Leap, came out in 2004 in its first edition. So it's had several editions since then. So that was, according to my advanced math skills, 2004 was a long time ago. It's been a while. And the feeling, I hear a lot from people, Pat, something like, I have an idea for a book. I've been wanting to write a book. I just haven't gotten around to it yet, but I've got a book in me. You hear that kind of thing a lot. So what I would tell you is, if you have that feeling, write the book.
Yeah. Take
the
action.
So what do I need to do to write a book? Well, you sit down and you write. So I would have, if I could do it over again, that first book of mine, or a first book, would have come out a lot earlier.
Yeah.
I would have taken the advice that I give other people now. I would have taken that for myself. Now, I did work for several years, and it took me a while, but I had opportunities from publishers and all that to write my own book back in the in the late 90s, and I would have done it earlier, because it changes everything. It changes everything. For one thing, I'll speak for myself. It gave me the opportunity to get really clear on what's important and what message I want to give to the world. And then once that book goes out, then that message goes out to the world, not necessarily capital W world, but a lot of people read it. Mm-hmm. And then I began to get feedback on these ideas having value for people. And man, there are few things that are more fulfilling than that. So I would have done that a lot earlier. Okay. You see, I'm short answer challenged, Pat.
That's okay. The more people talk, and the less I talk, the more good stuff that comes out. So you keep going. I love this. Yeah, I love it. So that's good advice. And there was, good advice that I would give to myself, but in the process of writing, I got a piece of advice from somebody that I'll pass along to you. I'll edit it a little bit, because I don't know how sensitive people's ears are to certain words. Very, very.
So I will. I'll let you fill in the blanks. I was starting to write, and I knew I wanted to write a book on leadership. I knew I had some things to say about love, for example, and this was back in the late 90s. And I wrote about 30 pages, and then I just hit the wall. And I called up a friend of mine, a guy who some folks may have heard of. His name is Karl Hammerschlag. He's a psychiatrist, a brilliant speaker, psychiatrist, the author of a couple of great books, including The Theft of the Spirit, which was one of my favorite books. And I called him up and I said, Karl, I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I just hit the wall. And he put on a psychiatrist hat, and he said, well, what do you think what do you think the issue is? What do you think the problem is? What are you struggling with? I said, well, the truth is, I'm absolutely terrified that I have nothing new to say. And he said, and this is what I will edit a little bit. He said, who the heck, it's not what he said, but you get it.
Yeah, I get
Do
it.
you think, he said, who the heck do you think you are that you would have something new to say?
I love it.
He said, that's your ego. That's your ego talking. You don't, it's not about having something new to say. It's about saying what you need to say and to say it in your own voice.
Yeah.
And if people resonate with that, great. And if they don't, at least you've said it. And that busted me through that wall. And I've never stopped hearing that advice.
That's great.
Over and over again. Yeah.
That's great advice. That's great.
Put your ego aside and do it.
Yeah. And be willing to take a stand, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Love that. So let's shift gears a little bit, because this is really what I want to talk to you about. So you wrote this book, Love is Just Damn Good Business. And what we heard a little bit in the intro about it. And yet let's just go back to, tell me how you came up with this concept first, and then we'll talk about the concept and some applications and maybe some strategies that you might offer people. So how'd you come up with this? Yeah,
it's really kind of a complex or it's a nuanced answer. When I was, it started when I was back at the Tom Peters Company. And the president of the company at the time was a guy named Jim Kouzes. So anybody who's a leadership geek knows the names Kouzes and Posner. They're the co-authors of the Leadership Challenge, that whole body of work. Jim was actually the president of the Tom Peters Company. He's the guy that hired me. And I started doing a lot of facilitation of their Leadership Challenge, Jim and Barry's Leadership Challenge workshop. That was a big thing what we did at the Tom Peters Company. So that's when I started to spend a lot of time with senior executives. And one of the practices of that Kouzes and Posner unveiled from their research was something called Encourage the Heart. And Encourage the Heart was all about, and still is, all about recognition and celebration. That's what leaders do. They recognize and celebrate other people and their accomplishments. And almost as an aside, almost as an afterthought, it was the comment was that Jim used to make all the time was, it's really about love. And in fact, he used to sign, he still does, he signs his messages, love them and lead them. So I remember when I would quote Jim or just kind of drop that word, the kind of response that people had to it was like, oh yeah, I guess that's, and this was in the 90s, right? It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, sure. But we never talked about it. Right. And what it did for me is it made me hyper aware of that as a dynamic. So I started to look for it. And the question I asked myself was, how common is this? How frequent is this in business? That love is a thing, How frequently do I see this in leaders in their organizations, for example? And once I started to ask myself the question and pay attention to it, oh my gosh, it was everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And the best leaders that I've met over the years, they love their work. They love their teams. The feeling is mutual. They love the mission that they stand for. They love the future they're trying to create together. They love the product and the service that they're offering to the marketplace. It just became really clear. And at the same time, it was very rare to hear people use that language. But there were a couple of things that hit the mainstream. Tim Sanders wrote a book in I think it came out in 2002 or 2003 called Love is the Killer App, which was kind of a groundbreaking book. And I was like, yeah, right on, Tim. That's right. So I started talking about that with my clients and in my keynote speeches, and it evolved into this LEAP framework, which I wrote about originally in the Radical Leap. And it's become kind of the operating system for what I call extreme leadership. And it stands for love, energy, audacity, and proof. Cultivate love, generate energy, inspire audacity, provide proof. So love as a business principle, as a leadership behavior, is something that I've been advocating for and teaching people for quite some time. But it was never, even with me, it was never like in neon lights. So if you went to my website in those days, right, it wasn't like, stevefarber.com and you go there and be big flashing sign that said the love guy. It didn't say that. It said extreme leadership. But then as you started digging around,
Right.
you saw it. And of course, whenever I speak and I teach and people read my books, they know that that's the main point. So with the most recent book, Love is Just Damn Good Business, it's the first time that I actually put it in a title. And the reason I called the book Love is Just Damn Good Business is because love is just damn good business. It's the conclusion that I've come to over the years. So it's not like, hey, here's an interesting idea. It's an observation. It's like, this is what is already happening. All I'm trying to do is shine a spotlight on it and say, hey, this reluctance that you have to say the word love and business in the same sentence, that's ridiculous. Why are you reluctant? We know how powerful love is in every aspect of our lives. We want to love our family. We want them to love us. We want to love our friends. We want them to love us. And then we go to work and somehow it no longer applies. It doesn't make any sense. It does apply. And if we understand that this is not about love as a sentiment, but more about love as a practice and a discipline, it changes everything about how we work and ultimately how we live our entire lives.
Well, and it's funny. I'm not going to tell you the company yet because I want to ask you some more questions. I was on a call the other day, and I think doing the research and getting ready for our call, I think I experienced somebody who had that love for their company. And before I talk about that, I want to go deeper because I don't want to give it away yet. So tell me, there's two perspectives, right? There's love for what they do and love for the company. And sometimes people love what they do and don't love the company. And sometimes people love the company and don't love what they do. So tell me how those two dynamics kind of come together.
Yeah. So the ideal scenario, if you go to the wide shot there, Pat, you'll see the poster behind me. It says, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. So this is one way to frame this up. The ideal scenario, one could argue, is, I love my work. I love the company I work for. I love the people I work for. I love the product that we serve. I love the mission that we stand for. I love our clients. I love, everything's love all the time. Wouldn't that be great? Most of us, it's not quite so cut and dried, although for some people there are. It is that way. So first of all, let's just acknowledge that we don't have to love everything. So for example, I love my work. I hope that this is clear to you and clear to everybody listening. I love it. Yeah. I don't love everything about my work. There are aspects of, I don't love the financial stuff. I don't love airports.
I was just going to say, you probably don't love airports as much now after the transition from COVID. We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't love airports. I don't love the financial stuff. I don't love, some of the minutia, detail stuff that I have to do. But here's the thing. Sometimes you have to do work that you don't love. There are things that you don't love that you have to do in order to do the work that you love, right? The technical term for that is called being an adult. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So back to your question, if I do think the ideal scenario should be that I love my work and I love the company that I'm working for, and I love the team that I'm working with. That is possible, and it's something to strive for. And there's a mutual responsibility there. One is, as an individual working within a business or within a company, I need to do whatever I can to bring my heart to that work. Now, if this is a miserable place, if the culture is broken somehow or dysfunctional, then I'm going to be somewhat limited, but I'm not entirely limited. In other words, I can create an environment, a microculture on my team that people love being a part of.
Right.
I'm not. It's a
choice.
It really is. But the flip side of that is, as a company, as a leader in a company, I need to strive to create a culture that people love working in. That should be high on my agenda.
Right.
And this idea that, well, I pay them to do the work, so that should be enough. Well, of course, money's important, but we should all know by now that it's not the whole story, right? And if I can create an environment that people love working in, they're much more likely to commit and to bring themselves with all of their passion and all of their creativity to work. And what's going to happen as a result of that? We're going to create products, services, and experiences that our customers will love. We want our customers to love doing business with us. Otherwise, we're dead.
Right.
And the only way to make that happen is to create a culture that people love working in. And I can't create that kind of culture or contribute to it as a leader unless I have it myself first. Yeah. So it all gets very personal very quickly. But ultimately, it is, in a business context, it makes sense because it yields results.
Right.
However we measure them, profitability, market share, turnover, all of that stuff will improve when people truly love what they're doing, who they're doing it with, working in this case, and of course, the customers that they're working for.
Well, and you shared there was an amazing story at your website about the shipping company, and I think it was, if I remember correctly, 4 CEOs in 5 years or something, and low retention and just implementation of this mindset and of these strategies turned the company around literally almost overnight.
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite current case studies. A company called Trailer Bridge. They're based in Jacksonville, Florida. Have offices all over the U.S. And Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. They're a shipping company. I mean, not an entirely sexy business, but they have an entire culture built around operationalizing love, energy, audacity, and proof. That extreme leadership framework. And the question that they asked from the beginning of Mitch Luciano's tenure, he's the current CEO. When he took over, like you said, they had been through 4 CEOs in 3 years, and they had been bankrupt. They'd lost tons of money. They had very high turnover because everybody hated working there. So he was tasked with the challenge to turn the company around, and he was a love guy. He was, he had read, listen, this is just the way it is. This happened before I even met him. So it could sound like I'm blowing my own horn here, but the fact is I hadn't even met him yet. He had read The Radical Leap, The Radical Edge, Greater Than Yourself, my first 3 books. There they are. And when he took over, he saw that as an opportunity to put those ideas into practice throughout the entire company. Right. So he did everything. He looked at everything from the actual physical environment in the corporate office to their systems, policies, and procedures. And the question that he asked was, how do we operationalize love in this? What should love look like in the way that we do business? And that had implications for everything from how they hired, the kind of people they hired, what their HR policies were, what their approach to their customers was. What did the physical environment look like? So he wanted to create an environment that encouraged people to get to know each other. So they started to, enhance the break room, ping pong table, foosball table, popcorn machine, so people would hang out together. He lowered the height of the cubicles throughout the office so people can actually look at each other eye to eye. He brought in started bringing in a food truck, I think every Thursday. They still do it. Food truck outside the office. They buy lunch for everybody so people will hang out together.
You love it.
And then, the town hall meetings where people could ask whatever questions they want.
They removed name tags too, right? They removed name tags.
Got rid of the name tags. Yeah. Got rid of the name tags because he said, hey, at the time there were 130 people, so we should know each other's names. So that was kind of symbolic. Get rid of the name tags and forced each other to get to know each other. And then they just asked the question of their employees, what do you need? What do you need from us?
Right.
And really, I'm not exaggerating when I say they made hundreds of changes over time. And I'll just skip to the punchline. Remember where they came from: toxic, awful environment. Right. They were voted number 1 best place to work in the city of Jacksonville a few years ago. The next year they were voted number 2 best place to work. which really kind of ticked off their employees because they felt they should still be number one. And then I'll fast forward to today. Just this last year, 2020, they were voted number one best place to work in the city of Jacksonville once again. They're having the most profitable years they've ever had in the company. In fact, 2 years, the revenues and the profitability of the company were greater than the previous 25 years combined.
Wow.
And they continue to ask the question to their employees, what do you need from us?
Yeah.
And I just talked to Mitch and Indy Bowman, who's their head of leadership development, interviewed them on the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast to kind of get an update. And they continue to ask the question, what do you need from us? So he said in the beginning, when he first took over, and he said, what do you employees, what do you need from us, your employer? And people said, well, we would like to have 2 computer monitors on our desks because it would make our jobs easier. So he said, okay. Made sense. And then people said, we would like an ice machine in the break room. And he said, okay, we'll get you an ice machine.
Simple thing.
And then, but here's the thing. 2 weeks later, there was still no ice machine. So somebody came to Mitch and said, hey, what happened to the ice machine? He said, I don't know. What happened to the ice machine? How come? And he realized that nobody ever ordered it. So the CEO of the company. So what did he do?
Ordered it.
He ordered it himself. They still talk about that today. How Mitch ordered the ice machine. And then just recently in the days of the COVID, the days of the COVID, they asked, what do you need? And here's what they discovered. A lot of people, they're working about 50% in the office, 50% at home. A lot of people at home with kids, their kids were going to school from home online. And many of them, their kids did not have laptops. So what do you think they did?
Bought them laptops.
They bought laptops for the kids because that's what they need. And that's their attitude. It's an incredible story. I can go on all day, but I won't.
Well, you know what I love about that, Steve, is one question. What do you need from us? I mean, this just one. It's just a simple question, and it's not like they're asking for new cars. It's one question.
And it's a question. So it's a question that answers the question, what should love look like?
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing that love looks like is being willing to ask the question, then asking it, and then honoring the answer, honoring the question by, if appropriate, providing that. So, and by the way, sometimes people ask for things that they say no to.
Yeah.
He said, when people said, hey, can we do beer pong Friday? He said, no, that's not a good idea.
You know what else strikes me about that and is there, my perception of that type of company is they're not a super customer facing company face to face, but certainly online, right? And you can feel that love online. And so I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I'm going to ask you a question. Is your perception of Apple a company where people love to be there and they love what they do?
To work there?
Yeah.
I think it varies from place to place within the company.
Okay.
Right. I think overall, I'm going to guess the answer is yes, at least from a pride and prestige standpoint.
Right.
I don't know if I need to make a disclaimer, but I do own some Apple stock. So I'm a fan.
And you're not a part of Reddit or anything, are you? I mean, we got to be real clear on this. Otherwise we're going to get called in front of the FCC or something.
I own this much Apple stock.
Yeah.
But I think people tend to love their technology.
Yeah.
I think the customer experience is a good one to look at with Apple because people who love Apple products love Apple products.
Well, here's why I asked.
I'm one of them.
I had to call the other day, and it's the first customer service line where I didn't have to wait on hold.
Yeah.
And the person picked up right away. I was like shocked. In fact, and I transparently, full disclosure, I am not an I person. I'm an Android person, but I had to deal with an I issue with a family deal. I was so impressed that they picked up right away and I didn't get a voicemail. We really appreciate your business. Right now, hold time is 25 minutes. That tells me I feel a lot of love. And then she was amazing. And so as I was preparing, I just thought, wow, what a great example. So let's shift gears a little bit. by the way, some great stuff. So if you were to give advice other than that one question, because by the way, I think that's great advice, just that one question. Small to medium-sized business owners, what would be one or two things you tell them right now to do to change the dynamics and move towards this concept of love in their culture or business?
It's a great question. So I'd preface it with a note of caution, and that is you ignore your business's culture at your own peril. Because the fact of the matter is you have a culture. Let's start with that. Acknowledge that you have a culture. Culture is not something that doesn't exist until you create it. It exists from the minute you started the company.
Right.
When you were just one person, you had a culture. Your relationship with your customers started to define your culture. As you brought people on board, there's a culture. But very few entrepreneurs consciously and intentionally build their culture from the very beginning. And then what happens is you hit a point where you have more people than you used to, and you look around and you go like, wow, we're having kind of a rough time here. Maybe we should pay attention to our culture. And it's never too late. But so first of all, understand that your culture already exists. You just have to be intentional about it. So if your intention is, as I believe it should be, to create a culture that people love working in, start with asking the right questions of yourself and the people around you. And one of those questions is one that we've discussed already a little bit here today. What should love look like in the way that we do business?
Love it.
So it's not enough to say, all right, let's just start telling people we love them.
Yeah.
Let's print a button that says we love our customers. That ought to do the trick. It's what do we need to do to create an experience that our customers are going to love? So it's a variation on the theme, right? So if you can imagine having, the age-old brainstorming session with your team that says, let's brainstorm how we can improve customer service. Great question. Okay. But if you ask the question differently, you get a different answer. And that question would be, what can we do to better show our customers that we love them? Or how can we create an experience that our customers will love? Not be satisfied with, not think is pretty good,
right.
But will love. And by asking that question, you start to raise the standards, raise the bar.
Yeah.
And you get qualitatively different answers to it. That's where it all starts. I mean, it really starts with that simple question. And then it's about using that as the lens to focus it in on every touch point in our business. So what are the implications in terms of our hiring procedures, in terms of our HR policies, in terms of our, like I said, physical environment, all of the above. Mm-hmm. And does it meet that love standard? That's the place to start. And by the way, if you want to talk it through, if you want some help with it, just reach out to me and we can brainstorm a little bit. I'm proud to say that on my team, collectively, we have helped close to 30 companies make it onto best place to work lists. So I know these ideas work, and sometimes you got to get deep in the weeds. And it's not an overnight thing, but it's incredibly fulfilling and rewarding for everybody involved.
Well, and I've got your website there scrolling. So, and you've got amazing resources there as well. We already talked about the books, which you can get at any of the major sites, certainly Amazon and the bookstores. So, Steve, two things I want to do before we go. I want to talk about best advice and worst advice you've ever been given. So what's the best advice you've ever been given that hopefully you followed, besides the advice you already talked about earlier?
Yeah. Okay. I got to give you a little backstory on this for it to make sense. You know me with my efficient ansers. Succinct and efficient is not the words next to my name. So I back in my Tom Peters days, we were giving a showcase to potential clients where we were giving little previews of the various workshops that we offered. And I gave a preview of a workshop called Leading Out Loud, which was developed by a guy named Terry Pierce, who became he was actually at the time one of my mentors. And it was all about authenticity. And this was back in the 90s again, right? I mean, authenticity is a big buzzword now, but it was about authentic leadership communication. And, how do you communicate as a leader in a way that really, where you're bringing yourself into it, not putting on a facade, etc. So I gave a little preview of leading out loud, authentic leadership communication. And at the end, one of the people in the audience came up to me and said, "Thank you for inviting me. This was very good." He said, "But I have some feedback for you," which is always a wonderful thing to hear right after you've given a presentation, right?
The tonality was you already knew.
That's right. This is not going to be, "You're so awesome," right? I said, "Okay, what is it?" And he said, "Well, I didn't think that you modeled what it was that you were teaching," which is pretty tough feedback when what you're teaching is authenticity.
Right.
And I said, "Really? Could you give me some specifics?" And he said, "Yeah, it's like your words are all perfect when you speak and your slides were just the right order. It was just like kind of this flawless thing." He said, "But it was really good. Thank you for inviting me." So I was really devastated by that. I mean, that's pretty personal stuff, right? Yeah. So I went home and I called Terry, my mentor and the author of that body of work, and I told him what happened. And I said, I don't know what to do with this, Terry. And he said, "Okay, a couple of things." He said, "Number one, just understand that you're never going to connect with all people. There's always going to be somebody you don't connect with." And I thought, "Oh, that's cool." I kind of let me off the hook, Yeah, great. Then he said, "And number two, assume he was right and go from there."
Wow. Oh my God.
And I got to tell you, Pat,
advice.
that was incredible advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to this day, I'm always challenging myself on that very thing. So but that's the advice. When you get feedback, right or wrong, justified or not, assume it's right and go from there. See where it takes you.
Yeah, you got to take the awareness of it. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to turn that upside down. The worst advice you've ever been given that hopefully you didn't listen to.
Well, first of all, how would you know it's the worst advice if you didn't listen to it?
That's true. Now
you had to listen to it.
Never said that. I love that.
You had to listen to it to find out that it was the worst advice.
Exactly.
So, funnily enough, that the worst advice I ever got was not the advice itself. It's based on, or it's related to the person offering the advice, and that advice is, "Trust me." Right?
How many times have we heard that, right?
Right. But the point is that from the right person, that's good advice. Right. From the wrong person, that's terrible advice.
Right.
Yeah. And I have, let's just say, taken that terrible advice more than once over the years. Yeah. So again, trust is a wonderful thing. And I want people to trust me, and I want to work with people that I trust. But you don't know if that's good advice or bad advice until you walk down the road a little bit. And I have put my trust in some people over the years that ended up being the worst advice I ever took, and others that were the best.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's probably a great book title. Trust from the right person. There you go. That's a good book title. So while I kind of wrap it up, I want you to think of one last thought you'd share with us before we go offline. For those of you listening, whether you listen live today or you're listening to the podcast, we so much appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to your favorite podcast subscription service or go to www.thesuccessascent.com and you can subscribe there and get our updates. So, Steve, tell us one last parting thought you would share with us.
Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do. There's a lot. I would invite you to reflect on that, because there are three major pieces to it. Doing what you love is the foundation for this whole thing. That's your connection to your work. In the service of people is the context. So you're doing what you love, but you're using that to serve people, to give value to other people. And you're serving them not because you simply feel obliged to, but because you want to have a huge impact, a positive impact on their lives. And when that happens, the result is reciprocity. They love you in return. And when you have people, when you have customers that raise their hand, or employees that raise their hand, or colleagues that raise their hand that say, "I love working with you. I love who you are and what you do." We want more of those people. Mm-hmm. That's our ideal deal relationship. So that's my parting thought. Do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
I love it. That's a great parting thought. Steve, again, thank you so much for being here today. You have absolutely provided such high value, and I know people will go back and listen to it and share it. And so I just want to personally thank you, and also thank Russ Collio for putting us in connection. It's a great little story there as well. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us today. As I end every show, be safe, be healthy, and have an awesome day. Take care. See you, Steve. Bye-bye.